John Devon Rowland Pertwee was born on the 7th of July 1919 and died on the 20th of May 1996. Best known for Doctor Who and Wurzel Gummidge, he would have been 100 years old this July. The third incarnation and the first in the 1970s, he was an iconic Doctor alongside his successor Tom Baker. In contrast to his comedic roles, he took the part seriously, playing him as a kind of action hero, with a love of gadgets, cars, and velvet smoking jackets. And his journey as a perpetual Doctor Who began on the 3rd of January 1970 with Spearhead from Space. At the time, all 4 parts attracted 8 million viewers. Nice. Written by Robert Holmes in his first great contribution to Doctor Who, and directed by Derek Martinus, it is, obviously, the first colour serial, and one of the only times a strike helped the production of the show. These 4 episodes were filmed on location because of industrial action, so it's entirely on film, with no disjointed change in quality when characters go indoors. This, honestly, makes it look much more professional, compared to what comes before and after. Then again, they don't have big awkward cameras to steer around, making it look more cinematic. For the longest time, it was the only one you could get on Blu-ray. It makes you wish more episodes of classic Doctor Who looked like this, even though it would have cost too much money to do it all the time. The only drawback, of course, is the sound quality, but at least it's possible to restore old episodes, so they can, and it has, been improved. And Robert Holmes' script is just as strong as the look of the episode. Grounding the Doctor on Earth should have been a terrible idea, and yet with the right people overseeing it, it works a treat. It delicately balances a traditional invasion with a not-so-traditional antagonist, with a new Doctor finding his feet among the chaos. Easy to follow and stands on its own feet, whether you're new to the programme or a die-hard Whovian. The episodes are paced really well too. You can tell Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat were influenced by it when it came time for them to write their first episodes as showrunner, and Chris Chibnall as well. With the action on Earth, Spearhead creates some iconic as well as frightening moments. The scene with the Auton in the Sealy cottage looking for the unit is edited well, ripped right out of a Universal horror film from the 1930s. And I can't forget the Auton's activation in episode 4. That moment is as dark and terrifyingly real now as it was when it first hit the screens at the dawn of the 70s. In the book Behind the Sofa, Celebrity Memories of Doctor Who, Charlie Brooker, yes, that Charlie Brooker, mentioned that you see a policeman get gunned down by an Auton and lying there on the ground, which he says they probably wouldn't get away with today. To paraphrase Brooker's dead set, Ofcom would be having a Mickey fit. Come to think of it, you see a lot of bystanders get killed off by the plastic men. On that note, I think the Autons and the Nestine are a brilliant threat to the story, and an underrated icon of the collection of Doctor Who monsters. They might seem normal, but get too close and you'll be in trouble. There's the foot soldiers, the leader who looks human, the replicas, and the final octopus-like monster in the machine. The lead Auton Channing is played by Hugh Burden. He might be more human-looking than the Scobie Auton, but he channels an otherworldly presence. In Terence Dick's novelisation of the story, he's actually the first ever Auton created by Hibbert under the influence of the Nestines. I think Burden deserves much more appreciation as a classic bad guy than he's given by the fandom. Dudley Simpson's music really makes him a memorable threat. They aren't at all scary when you see them run though. The Autons will return the next year to help introduce the Master, and aren't used until Rose in 2005, 34 years later. They have a small appearance with other monsters in the Series 5 finale, but have yet to return as a main threat. With all the plastic in our oceans, it seems like a relevant time for the Nestines to try and conquer the Earth again. If the Series 12 rumour has a basis in fact, fingers crossed it's a sneaky way to reintroduce them. There's a scene in this where Pertwee takes a shower. It's here that we notice for the first time he's got a tattoo. Possibly the only Doctor with one. In reality, it's the result of a drunken night out from Pertwee's time in the British Navy, but one writer chose to retcon it as a Time Lord symbol that denotes an exile. By sheer coincidence, it's shaped like a question mark. One thing that did stick though, is that Time Lords have 2 hearts. It wasn't established before this one, but has become a part of the character of the Doctor and the world he comes from. I haven't mentioned the rest of the cast. They're well played and include future Zygon John Woodnutt as Hibbert, the Autoplastics director under Channing's control. One character, Monroe, seems to have been intended as a recurring character and yet never appeared again after this. Instead, Benton and Mike Yates take over the role he might have played in subsequent stories. The legendary Nicholas Courtney's return as Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart is a welcome one. If you didn't see him in Doctor Who before this one, you won't get confused, because he tells Liz, and by extension the audience, about Una and the Doctor in the opening episode anyway. It's always great to see him contrast with the Doctor, and you'd understand his disbelief at seeing him with a new face for the first time. In this serial, we are introduced to Liz Shaw, played by the late great Caroline John, a skeptical scientist at first, employed by UNIT, who gets drawn into the Doctor's world and becomes his companion for the rest of the series. Her time as Liz, the companion who understands the Doctor's science fiction jargon, was all too brief and without a farewell episode, but she was always excellent. John's Doctor and his companions are much missed, but never forgotten. I hope new fans can appreciate them as much as I do, and those before me as well. Pertwee himself made an outstanding debut. He's the arse-kicking protagonist with the quirky side of the Doctor, as seen in his tangent about the Delphon who communicate with their eyebrows, and entering a room because it says doctors only, which every incarnation would do. It's odd to see him wearing a hat though. It doesn't catch on anyway. I'm also really happy they gave him the last line of the story, riffing on Bond, James Bond with Smith. Dr. John Smith, and a magical smile. I think any faults I have with Spearhead from Space are minimal. The editing can be hit and miss. The sea reporters is well done on one side of the coin, but on the other the timing cliffhangers and credits don't mesh. And not a review goes by without mentioning the final appearance of the Nestine. As hard as the actors try to sell it, it's pretty laughable. Look no further than this scene's YouTube comments to see people rip it apart. Bizarrely, another problem I have is the use of Oh Well Part 1 by Fleetwood Mac. I love their songs, but it comes out of nowhere in the factory scene. It wasn't always there due to music rights, but it's been restored since, and it's really jarring. No sooner has it shown up than it's vanished. Ultimately, the man we have to thank for such a strong opening is script editor turned producer and master problem solver Derek Sherwin. He actually has a cameo in Spearhead from Space as a security guard who doesn't get a word in due to an impatient Doctor. He would move on from the show after this serial to leave it in the capable hands of Terence Dix and Barry Letts, beginning with Patrick Troughton's swan song and ending on the best note possible. He passed away in October last year, aged 82, but he leaves behind the distinction of having created UNIT, the Time Lords, and without hyperbole I say this, being the man who saved Doctor Who. Thanks, Derek. And happy birthday, John. You captivated the hearts of so many as a unique Doctor, and you're a gifted performer too. It's one of my favourites, one I'll always come back to. Spirit from Space is a classic for a reason. It's both of its time and ahead of it. It's a standout example of this strange sci-fi show. 9.5 out of 10.